Like you mentioned one aspect that these are for those people who are actually studying medicine or are becoming doctors, and you always wanted that others should also join this healthcare journey. So this is a very positive point which our audience can also take a lot of encouragement from, because this world of endless possibilities in healthcare is not only limited to doctors. It is limited to the data analyst, it is limited to the networking scientist, it is limited to the psychologist also, or the sociologist also, for the social medicine, the community health, which we are talking about, the mass healthcare for the rural population. So with the pandemic, a lot of possibilities has come into the picture, that care has to reach, the same standard of care has to reach to the last mile people also, the last mile connectivity. What do you feel is the scope of India for this last mile connectivity? How do you compare it with the rest of the world? Like your Cleveland Clinic is a pioneer in telemedicine or consultative medicines across the continents. How do you visualize the changes that is happening in India, and what are these prospects, especially for mass healthcare to the remotest corners of the country?
Right, right. No, I mean, I think that's a great question. And I would say, that there are some fundamental changes that obviously need to happen in India for us to be able to provide healthcare, to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, both in terms of geography and in terms of income levels. Not everybody can afford to go to a Cleveland Clinic. And I get asked this question that not everybody can afford to even go to a top hospital in Mumbai or Delhi, leave alone United States. And incentives are important, obviously, but for physicians to go to these tier 2 and tier 3 cities, I know the Medical Council of India and government have some rules in place. When students graduate from medical school, they're supposed to cover these towns, small towns, for n number of years. But I would say the more than the remuneration, people should feel rewarded for going and serving in these areas. And it's very unfair for these doctors and nurses to support primary healthcare in tier 2, tier 3 cities if they don't have the infrastructure. So this is a perfect example where we need partnership between the government and the private entities to work hand in hand to provide the resources, to provide the infrastructure for these medical providers to go and provide healthcare. And then technology is, I would say, is a very good solution, but it is not answer to all the problems. Apollo, for example, has done an amazing job in reaching out to some of these primary health care centers in tier 2 and tier 3 using telemedicine. So I would say telemedicine is the answer to a lot of extent, for the tier 2 and tier 3 towns. But, things like education, things like awareness, sometimes these are best when people are there in person. Not everything can be accomplished using telemedicine. There are language barriers. There are so many other practical aspects where we need the government's help and aid in helping these tier 2, tier 3 towns. So the answer, I would say, is partnership between public and private sector to help these tier 2, tier 3 towns.
Yeah, well said, Deepika. The answer lies in the private-public partnership, and this is where the way economy is also looking for those partnerships, especially in the healthcare sector. But having said that, don't you feel that with the advent of technology, we reach so many things in which technology has bridged the gap of affordability in terms of money? I mean, the distance already it has breached. The technology has breached the distance. It has breached the language barrier also in the form of translations and expertise and video calling. You can see the gestures, and experienced doctors can also understand. What is still it has not been able to breach is the affordability, the cost factor. Do you think with the advent of technology, I will just give an example. In Hyderabad, I have heard that so many people who were diagnosed with COVID came positive. They did not visit the doctor. They just on the website or through that video calls or WhatsApp, they were diagnosed and they were given medicines and they became well. Also, I know few of the people not even meeting the doctors, and it was so very easy process. And take away the technology that people had to line up and go and visit the doctor, and the doctor would also fear to visit the patients. So having said that, how will technology impact the cost factor? Do you see a positive side to it? Will consultation for an ordinary Indian citizen in Cleveland Clinic would be possible in India in the future? That's my question.
Yes, I think, there is definitely strength in numbers and in economies of scale, when you try to bring down the overall cost of a process, then there is definitely value in reducing the cost. I would say insurance plays a huge role in this piece, in affordability. Insurance sector is very premature in India. I don't know the latest numbers, but at least 70% of the country still is uninsured. And COVID was an eye opener. A lot of people have started to consider, getting insurance in India. And, if insurance companies and payers, they play a fair game in the products they offer, then that can certainly bridge the gap in reducing the issues with pricing and affordability. For example, we are now just beginning to scratch the surface, and we meaning Cleveland Clinic, are talking to different insurance companies like Max, Bupa, and a lot of other top insurance companies to see where can we work together to make Cleveland Clinic care affordable to patients in India.
So, Deepika, you feel that insurance is one of the solution. If people can get insured somehow, मतलब कि that affordability factor can be मतलब कि overcome. So,
Exactly.
government also is working in the direction to bring healthcare facilities through insurance. The government is also coming into that sector. But
right.
even
But the
apart
cap
from,
is very low, Shanivas.
yeah,
As
yeah,
you know, the cap of these, what is available is just for inpatient. But I'll tell you what, the majority of the costs today are spent in outpatient, in pharmacy, in medications, in your diagnostics. That is an area which we really need to tackle, because we get, how many times do we get admitted? When I say we, the average citizen, we spend more money. I mean, with kids around, pediatrics, the majority of the expenses happen in outpatient and pharmacy, and that's where the insurance company also needs to start looking into. And we have played a heavy role in getting these conversations going with insurance companies to start thinking along those lines, which make more sense and makes healthcare more affordable.
Okay, Deepika, that is a very interesting aspect in which you are mentioning, but I will add a little thing which came to my mind while I was reading through this pandemic on healthcare. One aspect is that, like, the subscription-based model had changed the video viewing forever. Hotstar, Netflix. You subscribe and see wonderful movies and plethora of movies across all genres. So why can't the hospitals come into a subscription model rather than the insurance factor? Let us forget the insurance companies for a while and let the hospitals like Apollo or this Care or Cleveland Clinic or whatever come out with a subscription-based model. You keep on paying 500 or 1,000 or 5,000, say for example, every month. And whenever you need any consultation or anything, you just can log in, a plug and play kind of a health facility should be available to you across the board. Is it possible in future in India?
In some ways, perhaps not. Maybe for some services, like I would say, give you an example of preventative health, right? So if you have an executive health checkup program, say every year, where, we are doing X number of, tests, studies included as a package, then, you can prorate the price and say you pay so much and every year we can cover you for X, Y, and Z services. But what makes it complicated is, not every patient is the same in terms of their risk factors and comorbidities. When you have a patient who is coming in, with diabetes, with COPD, who's a smoker, the amount of resources they consume in an ICU, is very different from an otherwise healthy patient. So standardizing and coming up with, subscription is a good idea, perhaps for certain services, which, I think the hospitals are looking into now as we speak. But to standardize it across the board would be difficult given the complexities of what patients bring to the table.
Very well said. The complexities, every individual is very different from the other, and their comorbidities would be different from, and it's very difficult to come to a conclusive subscription based model. But having said that, what is the future of artificial intelligence in your consultative and diagnostic field? Say, for instance, I have read reports, how far it is true, Cleveland Clinic, WebMD, they are all saying that in future, the artificial intelligence rate of diagnosis is far ahead of the doctors. just look, a radiologist may look at it 10 times, but a artificial intelligence have billions of data and they can predict much better than say a human doctor. So why can't we bring in that factor and reduce the cost and reduce the so many other aspects of human intervention as far as
Right.
diagnostic medicine is concerned?
Right. No, you bring up a very good question because, we had a seminar just like I believe last week. And, we also had a medical innovation summit hosted by Cleveland Clinic where, we invited a lot of great speakers in the field of technology and innovation to present. And there were two schools of thought around artificial intelligence. One school of thought was that, as doctors, they have already been using intelligence in some ways when they take care of patients. It's only now that that there is this hyped so to say awareness in the public sector. Some physicians believe that artificial intelligence cannot replace human science, medical science, and that it will continue to only augment or only be an additive piece of information that will aid doctors in providing better care. But where I really feel, especially in a country like India, artificial intelligence or data science, that's a very wide subject, is epidemiology, right? Public health. Because I think we are a population of 1.2, 1.3 billion. But if you look at the amount of data that we are capturing compared to the Western world, it is very, very negligible. We have a huge deficit in collecting the correct data. I mean, even today, for example, I'll just give you a very small, practical example. You see a patient in a hospital, they're always carrying a big bag of records. How many times have you not seen that, right? When you're going for a hospital checkup, the first thing we do is, hey, did you take your file? I mean, think of where we are in healthcare. We're still that backward. On one side, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Now I'm so excited about what Prime Minister Modi ji has announced, with the health card. I don't know if you're familiar with the new opportunity that, the Prime Minister has laid out, but the idea is that everybody's health record is maintained in the chip. And that's where we need to be as in India, because, we are the pioneers of so-called, information technology in the world. But healthcare, in the healthcare segment, we've remained backward. So I believe there is, our currency is our data. And, before we can get to the step of artificial intelligence, our hospitals need to spend the resources to capture patients' data. I mean, no two systems talk to each other in hospitals. The radiology system is different, billing is different, pharmacy is different, your operating room procedure, it's captured in a different system, but patient is only one. And unless we're able to get these systems talking and we have a single electronic medical record for hospitals, we are not going to make, big leaps in AI or data science or use that data even. I think the Western world has at least, 20, 30 years ahead of us. But I do believe we have the capacity, we have the intellect to make that happen. And societies like HIM, I don't know if you're familiar with HIMSS Society, there are a lot of professional associations that are now talking about standardization and connecting all these data points together so that doctors can be equipped, with the information they need. And then we can talk about efficiency and AI. I think we still have some work to do from a data standpoint in India.
I agree with you. No two systems are talking to each other. The image of a patient roaming around with a lot of files in their hand is a common sight across hospitals. But let me tell you, it's not about only from the patient side. What we think is there is a lack of trust between the two. As you said, two systems are not talking to each other. The patient is a separate system, the hospital is a separate system, and within the hospital, the different units are a separate system altogether. And ultimately, he is at the billing counter, which is separate from the other sector. So
Right.
it's a well analyzed deficiency in our medical system. But you must be also knowing the fact that Internet of Things are becoming very, very affordable. Right now, if I'm wearing a band in my hand, which collects my SPO level also now, that's a in thing. And then it's collecting my blood pressure, it's collecting my metrics of other metrics, heartbeat and everything. Why can't it be connected to a hospital and say analyze the patient's or a person's healthcare, even if he's fit? And what kind of an industry is it going to be? It will not be a preventive industry which will prevent people from going and lining up in the hospital. They can this Internet of Things, if it is linked with artificial
Right.
intelligence or a diagnostic artificial intelligence, it can predict your next move, the
Mhm.
anticipatory medicine, which we can call. How far are we in this field? I mean, the world, and how is the future in this field?
I mean, I think we are no different than where, a few other countries are in terms of integration, right? I think what we're talking about is the ability to integrate data points from an outpatient setting to an inpatient setting. So I'll give you an example, right? Say, a patient walks out of a hospital admission, comes back home, goes to a pharmacy, gets his medications, and then the doctor advises him to monitor X, Y, and Z. Now, there is no way for us to collate all of that information and feed back to the doctor, right? I mean, the only way to do that is I would say hospitals should definitely invest in what we call a longitudinal electronic medical record, which combines the data from, collected inside the hospital and connects it to what is going on outside. So for that, I mean, we have a lot of open-ended interfaces and companies that are, creating this open-ended technologies. Collaboration is the word again, right? I mean, all these folks have to come together. The folks who are building these apps, whether it's Fitbit or we have so many companies in India now who are collecting heart rates and SpO2 and whatnot. So if this data can be actually combined, with meaningful data, like, does the patient have a heart disease? And then you look at their data, it's a very different perspective than somebody who does not have a heart disease, and you look at the numbers. But to analyze that, we need to have, again, meaningful data sets to work out of. The only way to do that is for technology companies to partner with hospitals and come up with a longitudinal way of capturing a single patient's data. The first step, again, as Modi ji has laid out already, is to have a unique identifier. Just like we have our Aadhaar card, if every data that is being collected is associated with that unique number, eventually we're going to be able to run a report on, what this patient did in the last 2 years. How many visits did he make? How many prescriptions did he fill? How many medications did he buy, right? So we need to be able to collect the pharmacy data, the outpatient data with the inpatient data, and, their lifestyle data. What are they buying? How much outside food are they ordering? Now, all of that can be combined. It's not too far where we can, see this longitudinal data record, as long as, we have the government's buy-in and we have the partnerships in place between these technology companies, the hospitals, and the government. And I think that's happening. It's just a matter of time, because people have realized the value of this data. And we have a lot of great experts from the Western part of the world who are now driving big companies in India, who see that this is a potential. So I'm very motivated in this regard, that this will happen. It's a matter of time.
Yeah, it will happen in just a matter of time, because the way technology is improving, especially with respect to the data, and that too in a country like 140 crores people, having that data is a huge task. But don't you feel there is another aspect to this data business also? We have a Aadhaar, then we will have a unique health number, and then merging, and then we have a mobile also, which can be a unique for a particular individual. So a unique identity will definitely come. But what about the privacy? Are we robust like the GDPR of the Europe, where they are maintaining that high standard of privacy as far as data is concerned? How far we in this race for data privacy? As you are saying that buying records are also would be there, eating records would also be there, the health visits also would be there. So where are we in terms of privacy? Will it not violate our fundamental right to privacy? And how do we balance that? That is a typical question which the thought leadership has to come out.
Yeah, and then I'm going to wear my legal hat now for this conversation. But India has the regulatory world in India is also changing, right? And there are a couple of acts now in place. Information Technology Act. There is Disha Act. At Cleveland Clinic and with our Indian counterparts, we have been discussing this a lot. Even to do a small video consultation, we had to put in a lot of thought about what is it that we are collecting from Indian patients before we send it to Cleveland Clinic. Where are we storing that data? And how are we giving access to third-party, vendors to even transmit this? So we had to do all our research. And although I would say the legislature is still on about, what is considered sensitive, confidential data, the government is definitely putting some thought around, what are the ways to protect it, not just from, the use of public domain, but data has become currency now. People are making money from revenue from data, from selling and purchasing data, right? So as of today, from what I understand, any data that is being originated in this country belongs to India, and foreign institutions will have to fetch the data from our servers, from within our geography, to be able to get it. If not, we own the data. Therefore, patient consent in the healthcare world, we have spent a lot of time developing, at least for the business we do, a very detailed patient consent, where we ask them, would you be open to sharing your data for research? Would you be open to sharing the data that you shared with us for testimonials, patient-driven testimonials, right? To share your story for vendors. And then only with their consent, I think, then you should be able to exchange the data. Because on one hand, if we don't have that data, we are crippled. We are not going to be doing any advances on research and whatnot. But then I think it's up to the patient, right? As long as we have the right consents and the process in place to make sure we have their consent and they're informed about where the data is going, I think then it's a fair game.
Yeah, ultimately it boils down to the consent. If the individual is giving consent, there is absolutely no harm in using the data. But that robust do's and don'ts have to be built, and it is still in the process of being built worldwide. It's not that the data privacy aspect is over in Europe and America. They're still working on that.
I mean, I'm sure we all remember the interview with Mark Zuckerberg in Facebook, and he was drilled, for, what his policies were on, the use of his data. So I think you're absolutely right.
You are pointing to the congressional briefing and hearing.
Yes. So you're absolutely right. I think even the Western world is, still trying to get their arms around the whole privacy piece and how to use the data and, the ethics of, the misuse of this data also. Yeah. We definitely have work to do.
Achha, now having talked about various aspects of healthcare, I would like to ask that Indian government is very much sincere about promoting the traditional system of medicine, what we call the Indian system of medicine, Unani system, the Ayurvedic system of medicine, the Siddha. So having such a huge population, it would not be wise for a government to only promote a certain kind of healthcare system, say the Western system, and you have a lot of indigenous knowledge which is waiting to be explored and to be used. How is the Western system, like your Cleveland Clinic and our Indian system, which a lot of people cannot go to the allopathic by choice or by design or by their faith and belief, a lot of things go into the mind of a patient. So how far we can integrate the Western system of medicine and the Indian system of medicine? For this, I would like to invite one panelist, Dr. Wasim. He is an Income Tax Joint Commissioner of Income Tax, Hyderabad. He's an MD in Unani Medicine also.
Oh, great. Okay.
So he would like to ask, he has worked a lot in this COVID area about traditional system of medicine and what government Ayush Ministry is into the guideline. So you'd like to ask some questions, how to integrate this Western allopathic system of medicine, the Indian system of medicine, and what is the future ahead. So he will ask you a few questions as a panelist. Sure. Dr. Wasim.
Yes, just first question I want to know, is there any need of telemedicine in Ayush system of medicine in India, or what is your opinion, ma'am?
That's a very interesting question. So we've been in the market for 3 or 4 years now, and we've received a lot of inquiries. The inquiries that we triage are very, mostly from very complicated cases, or patients who have cancer or heart disease. But I think I do remember, sitting in a panel about in an event last year where this question was asked. What is the role of the non-conventional medicine in healthcare? And I would say, the best answer to that is there are certain areas like pain management, mental health, with yoga, and we talk about the stress points and pain relief points. There are certain areas where this has been accepted or acknowledged by Western medicine, whereas for everything else, the Western world questions the data. So I think if we have enough data to support the practices, we're able to publish it, I think then, we'll have a great standing in an international podium. But Westerners, more and more are beginning to believe, in some of the traditional concepts of pain and healing and wellness when it comes to our old Indian practices. So the demand continues to grow. I think, there are a lot of facilities in Kerala now that are offering Ayurvedic treatments, and there are a lot of cancer patients who travel from around the world, to come and heal. But I feel, again, like I said, we need more data and, published research on the effectiveness of these treatments to be able to make a point in an international podium.
Yes. I want to know what is the need and scope? What is the need and scope of telemedicine in these traditional systems?
Telemedicine in these, I mean, to be honest, I don't think, based on at least my experience in the market, we haven't explored or we haven't received as many inquiries from a telemedicine standpoint towards these non-traditional medicine inquiries. Yeah. So I think we have a long way to go. We may have, and also, I don't know if, we've promoted this enough through telemedicine. The services, maybe perhaps once you start marketing these services in the right platforms, then, the folks who are actually looking for these services may know that this is available.
दीपिका
I
जी,
hope that answers your question.
हाँ दीपिका जी, मैं कहीं पढ़ रहा था 2-4 दिनों पहले कि गवर्नमेंट की ये भी ख्यालात है कि वो अगर किसी हॉस्पिटल में अगर एक पेशेंट जाए तो उसके लिए 2-3 तरह के सिस्टम्स अवेलेबल है. अगर एलोपैथिक है या इंडियन सिस्टम है तो उसको चॉइस मिलनी चाहिए. Patient should get a choice. Like I said, now if we enter a hospital, we have no choice. We have a Western system of it. I'm not going to the scientific aspect, whether it is proven or disproven. I'm talking purely from a patient point of view, a consumer, or a client, or a customer. So if he goes to a hospital, तो जो वसीम कहना चाह रहे कि अगर हम किसी हॉस्पिटल को विजिट करते, मान लीजिए क्लीवलैंड को ही, तो क्या मुझे वो ऑप्शन है कि हम इस डायरेक्शन में जाए, एलोपैथिक जो उनका है, या फिर हम अपने इंडियन सिस्टम में भी जा सकते कुछ, या इंटरकनेक्टेड भी है? अगर ठीक हो कि हम फिर वेलनेस में जाना चाहते, सर्जरी के बाद वेलनेस में जाना चाहते, रिकवरी में जाना चाहते, तो हम आयुर्वेदिक में चले गए, यूनानी में चले, ऐसा कुछ कंसेप्ट है, बिल्डअप हो रहा है वेस्टर्न में?
जी हो रहा है, जरूर हो रहा है. एटलीस्ट आई कैन स्पीक टू माय हॉस्पिटल क्लीवलैंड क्लिनिक में पेन मैनेजमेंट के स्पेशल एरियाज में, एंड देन इवन आफ्टर सर्जरी देयर इज अ कंप्लीटली डिफरेंट डिपार्टमेंट. इट्स कॉल्ड डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फंक्शनल मेडिसिन, वेयर focus has been completely on the other techniques also, and it's always in combination with the surgical techniques, with the traditional medicine. Options to patients ko hai. I mean, ultimately consumer decides which route they go. I would say it's not as awareness itna nahi hai jitna India mein hai. India, I mean, obviously is a country where all this is originated, right? So in terms of awareness, there's definitely opportunity. People who know about this go online, they search, they try to find ki kahan pe ye service is available hai. So I feel the onus is on the patient, what they want to do. Hospitals are not going to promote these, right? I mean, one, because at least in the US the practice is completely different. Now raha India mein, I think there may be more potential to offer these.
एक्चुअल में मेरा क्वेश्चन यही था कि जैसे आपने कहा कि केरला में आयुर्वेदिक हॉस्पिटल है, और देयर इज द मेनी हॉस्पिटल्स ऑफ द आयुर्वेदिक एंड होम्योपैथी, सिद्धा एंड यूनानी इन बैंगलोर, यूनानी नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट इन दिल्ली. तो जस्ट आई वांट नो टू कि इनको भी टेलीमेडिसिन की फैसिलिटी देनी चाहिए, और ऑल ओवर इंडिया के लोग केरला ना जा करके भी केरला की से कंसल्ट कर लें, ये इंडिया में होना चाहिए कि नहीं होना चाहिए? आपका क्या ओपिनियन है इसमें?
तो I think some of these questions थोड़ा बहुत market research की जरूरत होगी, right? I mean, this is where we need to survey patients की उनका interest level क्या है, उनका experience क्या रहा, and for the ones who are searching for these services, absolutely, I think like with any other service, telemedicine should be offered as an option to these patients if they chose to go that route. So definitely, you should consider giving that opportunity of information to the patients and leave it to them whether they want to take it or not. Especially in COVID, बहुत सारे लोग अभी तो travel नहीं कर सकते. This is the best time to create awareness campaigns about the services, in my opinion. because people are looking online. Abhi bahut sare log, they're just scared to go to the hospital. They're looking for every bit of information online, and that's where you can capture the audience and at least create awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
दीपिका जी, मैं
Thank
जरा
you, madam.
स्विच करूंगा, मतलब कि ये एस्पेक्ट को हेल्थ केयर से करियर की
जी।
तरफ मैं कुछ पूछना चाहूंगा, क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोग इससे भी मतलब कि जानना चाहेंगे कि भाई करियर सिर्फ मेडिकल वालों का है, ये जो साइंस पढ़े हुए हैं, या आर्ट्स का भी कुछ पॉसिबिलिटीज है हेल्थ केयर सेक्टर में? अगर है तो वो कितनी बड़ी मार्केट है, और किस किस जगह पे जो नॉन मेडिकल या जो नॉन साइंस बैकग्राउंड से है उनके लिए क्या क्या अपॉर्चुनिटीज अवेलेबल है एज अ करियर healthcare?
Ji. Especially folks who are interested in art, I would say I can think, or photography, right? I mean, there are 2 or 3 different unique offerings that hospitals have. For photographers, you may think, I'm a photographer, what job am I going to get in a hospital? But there are the birth of a child, is a very special event in everybody's life, right? And photographers have now are working for especially mom and baby hospitals, amazing work they're doing for when the mom is pregnant, when she gives birth. In fact, when I delivered my child too, I consulted a photographer inside a hospital. I want to capture that moment, right? So that's one example that companies are now just focusing on mother and child photography inside a hospital. Now, the second piece of information is at least in our hospital in Cleveland Clinic, we have what we call art walls. So when you start walking past the hallways, right, especially in the pediatric floor, हम लोग का philosophy है कि art is a form of therapy. So photographers are invited to post वहाँ पे पूरे जो paintings वगैरह हैं. So there is scope to even sell your products, sell your artwork in hospitals as an artist. 3D paintings, 3D का जो technology we talked about, advances, we need people who can actually draw. I mean, so you'll be surprised कि artists को कितने सारे job options available होंगे hospital में. And then you talk about people who can create brochures and marketing. We just talked about the need for marketing, non-traditional products to India, right? So wo space, maybe when you start thinking about, okay, how do I market a service? The first thing that comes to mind is people who can write and communicate the message. The writing, medical writing, we were struggling with, finding good people who can write about medicine. Because it takes an art. Sab log nahi likh sakte, right? Then the ones who can write don't know the medicine. The ones who know medicine cannot write. So how do we communicate messaging, to patients? So I would say writing, artwork, photography, or kya hai? Give me other examples. I'll tell you. I'll find a job for every person in a hospital. You'll be surprised. I mean, nutritionists, fitness experts, IT to hai, So yeah, give me an example and I'll connect the dots.
In fact, I'm very much impressed. I have read so many things about healthcare, but never it occurred to me, or nobody wrote also, that a photographer can have a good business inside the hospital. We always thought that the photographer is required in the mandap, or where the wedding is taking place, or the engagement is taking place. But it's a wonderful take on the job possibilities that exist on a serious note on healthcare. So the possibilities are endless. You just have to search and do a little bit of research. But having said that, healthcare, or the public healthcare, how huge is the market for the coming generations? Does the healthcare in India has the possibility to absorb the huge candidates which are coming for the job market, like the IT sector? The IT sector gave a lot of money to the Indian middle class and to the public, and they made the students dream as an IT career. Does healthcare sector also have that huge possibility post-COVID to absorb so many people inside the healthcare sector? Do you have any idea of the market study on that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have numbers on the top of my head, but I know the areas, right, where, there's going to be a humongous need. So doctors and nurses, it is an undisputed fact, we need them. Now, the other areas where I feel, there can be a huge demand is, technicians, lab technicians, people who assist the doctors in conducting a lot of these procedures. Unfortunately, in India, we do not have enough training for these lab technicians. And the reason I can say this with confidence is with the number of inquiries I get, for training these people from abroad. So companies like GE, like Philips and Siemens, who make these medical devices now are coming up with their own educational programs to create more technicians, because the awareness nahi hai ki aise jobs exist ho sakte hain, and they're very well paid. So that's one area. Dusra area hai what we call in the US as mid-level providers, right? They are nurse practitioners and physician assistants. Now they take up a lot of good work. They take off the load from the physicians, in the US. That is lacking in India, because the gap between a physician and the knowledge gap between a nurse is very wide. Nobody else is able to fill that gap. US mein jaise ek procedure ho jata hai, right? It gets transitioned to a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant, and then they take care of the patients from that point on. If there is something very critical, then the doctor is consulted. But yahan pe the complete burden of the care is only on a doctor. So creating those roles of mid-level providers, nurse practitioners, bumping up the nurses ka potential is tremendous. India mein it's been very under-captured. Nurses are only, taking instructions from doctors, whereas in the Western world, nurses ka role is, a lot more. So I think, there are definitely opportunities to reinvent, some of these roles, and also to fill the gaps, that exist today. In terms of, technicians, paramedics.
I fully agree with you. The potential is very, very immense. And I really like the gap which you talked about, the doctor and the nurse. It's quite visible on the ground when you visit the hospital. So this middle level, somewhere the government must think about creating a specialized or a technically proficient cadre, which can bridge the gap between the doctor and the nurses and act as a handy to the doctors. So that will take a lot of effort away from the doctors, like they're too much stressed out. And that time saving can be used in the core sector of diagnosis and surgery. Second aspect which I wanted to talk about is, in India, I think there's a lot of requirement of bedside assistant and the terminally ill patients, the care they require. So even in Hyderabad, if you search for bedside assistant, it is very difficult to get professionally operated bedside assistant. So a lot of possibilities are there. Having said that, while I was perusing through the university list of top 100 universities in the world, and especially in UK, Deepika, you would be knowing, but a lot of people would not be knowing that nurses is one of the prominent course in every university, say Edinburgh, Manchester, Glasgow, Liverpool. They have a healthcare professional, MS in healthcare, MA in healthcare, nurse, MA in nurse. But in India, we don't have such faculties. We look down upon. So there's a huge possibility existing.
Yeah, बहुत cultural deficit hai, with how nurses are not, I wouldn't say treated, but the capabilities of nursing in India has been very undermined. If you go to a foreign hospital, sometimes the physicians just come in and go. It's the nurses that take the onus of 80% of the care, which can only happen with the proper certification, proper education. Unfortunately, the funding is lacking in this space, right? Jo bhi training hai, even the training, not dollars, but the money gets mostly, invested in the physicians. Even from a hospital standpoint, abhi, for example, we have a lot of good courses for nurses that Cleveland Clinic is willing to offer to India for a fee. There is no interest. I mean, if I offer a physician course, hospital administrators, they're willing to invest, because for them, it's all about ROI. But nurses quit training, say ROI kya? It's the ROI is really patient experience. But what isn't it for them? Kind of a mentality hai abhi yahan pe. That needs to change, and I think government has to invest in nursing education in a way. And I think the priority is always taken by the doctors, so that has to change. It has to come from top below. Yeah.
More to do with social and cultural ecosystem which we haven't brought. We look down upon nurses, right? But they have the system of Nightingale. They know the story of Nightingale, and they're very impressed with the nursing system. They feel that before the doctor arrives, the nurse who takes care. We have seen a lot of movies before the doctor arrives. It's the nurse who are taking care of the patient and the wounded, and so the system is there, the psyche is there. So we have to build up a psyche, and slowly post-COVID, I may tell you a lot of respect for the healthcare professionals have risen up like anything. So it's a very smart beginning and a very positive beginning. But my last question to you would be, in India, becoming a doctor is a tedious process. First of all, you have to go through the dreaded entrance exam.
Yes.
Not many concur it, and every child has got some sort of mental beating from their parents. You could not qualify to become a doctor. Others have done that. Mr. Sharma's son has become, Mr. Tiwari's son has become, and so, something like that. We have a culturally ingrained towards becoming a doctor, the efficient of nobility in the
Right.
But how far do you think that it should be made so difficult to become a doctor when you have a population of 1.4 billion people to take care of, and out of that 60% of people who require immediate, and in a pandemic we are short of doctors. Why make it so stringent? Is it necessary, or can we have a middle ground in which we can have a lot of doctors so that they can service a lot of people, the Indians? What is your view on this?
You know, I think among all the professions that exist out there, you know, I think physicians have the utmost responsibility of handling a life. And to be able to handle a life, you need to be trained, because if not, you're going to not be able to save a life. So I think the training is essential, but we'll have to think of creative ways of assisting these doctors. Like I said, the answer is obviously, you know, number one, increase the number of medical colleges. I think the entrance exams sometimes can be very tough, and there's a lot of good people who have the ingredients to be good doctors, but don't make it just because of that competitive entrance exam. So I think the government has to evaluate their methodology for, you know, how they determine who can make a good doctor and who cannot. It's just not, it should not solely be based on, you know, MSET or, you know, whatever, you know, competitive scores. Secondly, I think physicians are not the answer alone to solve this problem. I think, like we talked about, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, you know, short-term courses that can be helpful in generating, you know, a lot of this workforce in a very quick and efficient manner, yet not compromising on the safety of the care that these people give. So the training has to be superb, right? You don't always need 4 years. Maybe, you know, in 2 years you can generate very good nurses. So the training curriculum has to be evaluated, and the quality of that has to be evaluated.
I fully agree with you. More than anything, it is the training, the standard of training matters. It's not the duration. So we are thinking, like, for instance, I will tell you, Google, they have reduced the 4-year engineering course to 6 months. You know that they have come out with 4 courses: user experience, UX, data analytics, project management, and another. So do you think this higher education will survive? The universities have to think to reduce their 4 year, 5 years of engineering to 6 months, which Google will teach. They will only teach what is required in the industry. So that has a side effect also. But what I'm saying is that nurses training can be reduced. Doctors training also can be standardized to bring down the duration. A lot of scopes can be done. Like you said about entrance examination. हम कहते हैं ना कि हर डॉक्टर जो टॉप किए कोई जरूरी नहीं है कोई अच्छा डॉक्टर है जिसके हाथ में शिफा हो. लोग कहते हैं ना उसका हाथ बहुत अच्छा है सर्जरी में, तो कोई जरूरी नहीं कोई टॉपर हो एम्स का हो. बहुत सारी बातें हैं ट्रेनिंग में.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I completely agree with you. You know, this is a very changing, dynamic environment of learning. Technology is adding another layer of challenge where we are constantly expected to learn and relearn. Medical field also is, you know, part of the same industry where we are doing things very differently. You know, abhi gastric surgery, we don't need to open up the stomach like we used to, right? So, uska skill set alag hai, you know, and if you're not a learner in any industry, whether it's healthcare or, you know, take information technology, if you're not a learner, I think you're going to stay behind in the game. So short-term courses should, you know, definitely be the answer to a lot of these issues where there is a short-term need, you know, technology is changing, then you go learn something else based on what's out there. So as a, you know, it's not like, you know, our times where we got one degree and we used the degree until we died. Last day tak wohi degree ke knowledge use kare. It's that, you know, the generation now is different. I think we have to continue to learn until our last breath.
Yeah, absolutely. The new thing which you have added is that I was not aware of that, the short-term courses in healthcare sector. That's the wonderful way of bridging those gaps where the health sectors are. Why learn 10 years? If you are really in public health, you need to learn only those aspects which you are. That's segmentation of the market, as we can say in medical MBA terminology. So that needs a lot of scaling up in India, and we are hopeful that it will come. With the post-COVID, a lot of new thinking has come. So before ending, my always respect to speaker is that kindly type your email where a lot of people can interact with you if they want to enter into the healthcare sector and get a kind of mentoring through you through email. So would it be possible for you to share your email so that they can connect with you if they want to know something about the healthcare sector? So if you can type in the chat box.
Yep.
And before we end, Deepika, I would like to thank you so much for being such a wonderful speaker. In fact, I will tell you in Urdu, बेखबर आए थे बाखबर जा रहे हैं. We came in ignorance and we are going as expert. So such was your lecture that it has opened up a lot of vistas, especially in the form of how healthcare should be scaled up, how healthcare should be implemented across the board, how mass healthcare should be introduced, what is the role of technology, and how standardization of training can be done, what is the need for a lot of nurses, how short-term courses can be built, and what are the career prospects. When somebody looks at the way you have spoken, I can assure you that a lot of hope and credibility will come to the healthcare sector. Hope in the form that mass affordability and this reach would always be there. And then the aspect that when the economy opens up, and it has to, the first sector that will recruit is the healthcare sector, because there's a lot of possibility and a lot of investment opportunities that are coming into this sector. So a lot of good days are ahead for these healthcare professionals, but I will also scale up our knowledge and the mechanism through which we select the healthcare sectors. We have to open up new courses, and we have to give them respect which the society does to others. Like in IT, it's not that everybody is a data scientist. In IT, there are a lot of things which we don't know, which are just at the bottom end of the IT, but still they are also IT software professionals. Right. So that respectability we have to give to the healthcare professional also if this sector has to go up. This is my take on it. With a big thank you to you. I'd like to hear your parting message for the audience.
Well, yeah, firstly, I would like to thank you for the opportunity. This has been wonderful engaging with you and the audience. My parting message, is twofold. One is invest in health. Whether you're a doctor, you're a patient yourself, what I'm seeing is people are buying Armani suits, they're driving Mercedes Benz, but when it comes to their health, they're not making the correct investments. So please focus on health and fitness. And number two, if you are pursuing a career in healthcare, please don't forget the human connection and the empathy piece. Only if you're able to empathize, you're able to listen, don't go into healthcare career for remuneration. You get this anywhere, but, look for the rewards, look for your, purpose of why you're in this profession. That's all.
Absolutely marvelous. That the parting message which you gave to the new generations, that do not look at money only. Somehow money will come from any sector also, but the empathy, the kind of compassion and kindness you require in healthcare sector, no sector ultimately requires. So it's a wonderful message to our audience. And Deepika ji, I'm really honored to be with you in this session, and we are blessed, and now we are expert. I think I can myself, by listening to you 2 or 3 times the video on YouTube, which we will post, I can also speak on healthcare in some way down the line, because we have become a little bit of expert. And I thank you for your time and for your dedication for this cause, for building up a young generation who can enter the health sector. And I thank you from my side and from the department side, Minorities Welfare Department, for having given your consent to attend this session. Thank you so much, Deepika ji.
Honored. Thank you so much. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Stay healthy and stay blessed, Deepika ji. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Likewise. Bye-bye.